Hello and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. My goodness, I have the most amazing guest with me today. She is truly a warrior and the most courageous woman I have ever spoken with. Her name is Shekhinah. She is the founder and owner of From the Floor to the Door, a program of trauma, escape, and recovery, where trauma experience becomes coaching expertise. She is also the mother of 2 children and an advocate and mentor for women and teens who have experienced trauma and abuse. Michelle has her own personal story of surviving domestic abuse, and she is going to share how she managed to go from the floor to the door. Michelle, oh my goodness, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
What an amazing story you have.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn it over to you because I didn't include any of the details in your intro.
Okay.
So just go ahead and take it away and tell us what happened.
Okay. So I'm going to start at the beginning where I come from a very large traditional family. I'm the youngest of many siblings and grew up in a traditionally strict home, let's say, where we respected our elders. When we went out in public, we sat quietly. But there was also a lot of family trips and fun and discipline because back in the day, that's what was done. And that's what I had in my background is you respect your elders. My father, a medical professional, he was the head of the household. My mother worked with him and ran a little bit of the office. She ran the home, all of that. So that wasn't as traditional. They were very big philanthropists. They gave back to the community. We were involved with other families, and again, we respected our elders and we were like one big family. So it was really a beautiful thing. When I decided to get married, I wanted something very similar because I grew up, even though there were challenges, I grew up fairly happy as any child can. I became a healthcare professional very young, in my early 20s, and I was pretty set for life at that point. I just wanted to find a partner to share it with. Well, I met somebody through other people, and within a couple of months, he proposed to me in front of a lot of people. And, we know now what red flags are. Back then, we didn't, but that would be seen as a red flag nowadays. In some communities, that's actually the norm. Like in any sort of religious, Orthodox religion, things like that, from dating to marriage is a very short time. Well, that's not who I am. That's not what I'm involved in. But I went ahead with it and I thought I had met the dream guy. We were going to have a fairy tale everything. What I didn't know was there were drugs being used at my wedding by him and by his friends. He had been using them that whole weekend. And I didn't find that out until I left a few years ago. So within the over 20 years of being married, I did work a little bit in my profession, but when we had children or our first child, it was kind of not said or agreed upon, but uh, I was meant to stay home. He had started a business and I was working with him, and then our first child came and there were some issues. So as the mother and the caregiver, I did end up staying home and taking care of him and all that needed to be done. With that being said, the part of I didn't know what I didn't know really took off. I didn't know about the wedding. I didn't know what he really did in his businesses when I stepped out. I didn't know what was going on there. I didn't know he was being investigated by certain, organizations within our country. I didn't know any of that. So what happened was I created a home that I grew up in. We had traditional family dinners, we had holiday parties, events, things like that. I became very known in the community. I was always volunteering. I believed in giving back and I enjoyed that. And that was my friend base was from there, all of that. I was very active in the schools. I was always a room parent, a PTO president, fundraising chair, all of that. Again, I did not know what I didn't know, because when he left to go to one business or another that he had had or he was working for, I didn't know where he went during the day. This was really before cell phones, or the beginning of cell phones. It was before the internet,
Mhm.
because, I am a little older. So when he came home to a meal on the table, even though at this point, let's say I had two children, there's a little bit of an age gap, he would sit down and eat dinner, and I thought all was well. Later on in our marriage, he admitted to going to get quote unquote massages during the day or what have you. I know. And, I didn't understand any of that because I didn't grow up with that. It wasn't in my wheelhouse. And it isn't for a lot of people. It is for some, and that's okay if it's not hurting anyone else. But as we know now, as far as the workers, we'll get into that. We understand that it hurts everybody. So what happened was, I was raising the kids, I was involved in the schools, involved in the religious organizations, and I think that he was a little bit bored. It wasn't for him. He had his own trauma, and look, this is me giving him the benefit of the doubt, which is what, people ask, why did you stay? Do you hear what I'm saying? So I'm already giving him the benefit of the doubt and trying to make excuses for him. There are no excuses, because what happened was I had something really traumatic. I lost somebody who I was close to, and we were in our early 40s, and she loved life. And I came home to the funeral, of which I went to by myself. He wasn't there to support me, which was very common. As I said, I wanted to really live my life. I wanted to enjoy every moment, because I was stuck in that stay at home mom, wake up,
Mhm.
take care of the kids, do the laundry, pick them up from school and all that. And I loved every part of it. But I thought, there's this great big world, because she used to travel a lot. I'm like, there's this great big world. Let's do it. And I didn't know what I was saying to the person I was saying it to, because I said, I want to live my life with you. And I really wanted to celebrate life and live it to its fullest. So that meant to me like traveling, seeing other cultures, doing that. To him, that meant taking my hand and walking me through this dark tunnel that he was one foot in, that I didn't know existed. And what that included was alcohol, drugs, sexual deviance, all of that. And it's stuff that you see, let's say, on parts of the internet. It's stuff that you see on certain websites. And he was really smart because he did it very slowly. And it was first a date night, and then it was first a date night, and we'll go to this club. And it was first a date night, then we'll go to the club, and then we'll go to this after hours something or other. And, I'm kind of looking around and I'm like, what is this? So the minute I started resisting, that's when he started with the drugs. And I didn't know that he was already involved in that. I didn't know that he was doing it in college. And I didn't know that he had done it at my wedding with his friends. I didn't know. And he started to tell me these things. And so, yes, I'm starting to think, who am I really married to? Because this is not who was presenting to me for all these years. This is 17 years into my marriage.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. So I mean, our families are connected and close and all of it.
And Michelle, let me
And
just ask you for a minute. Did anybody
sure,
else know?
no, no.
And when he took your
Hmm.
hand and started to
Hmm.
introduce you to
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
lifestyle that
Hmm.
you had no idea even existed, what
Hmm.
was your initial reaction?
My initial reaction was, he loves me and he wants to be with me.
Mm,
Because again, childhood trauma, childhood stuff, for
mhm,
lack of a better word. It's because I knew that he was pulling away. I could kind of see him veering
mhm,
a little bit. And, this was my husband. I wanted to do what I could to keep his attention on me because of my
mhm,
own insecurities. What had happened, the strength that I felt as a healthcare worker and the strength as an independent woman was completely gone. I
mhm,
became dependent on him financially. I became dependent on him emotionally. He would say, it's us against the world. He started to alienate me against my family. And the
mhm,
friends that I was really close with in the religious organization, the women leadership groups that I was in, he didn't want to hang out with those couples anymore. It was more these other couples. So my support system started to slowly change.
Hmm.
And I got involved in groups of people that had the same values that he did at this point. And again, it was all done very subtly. And here it was, people would say, "Why are you so nice?" Or, it's almost like they knew I didn't belong there.
Hmm.
But the men and the women were really sharp. The women have their own tactics to get you to feel like a sister. And here it is. I have sisters, but I'm not talking to them because he's got me brainwashed into it.
Wow.
And so these are now my sisters. But these girls at this point are into what he's into. So I could feel myself coming apart a little bit in that regard, but I didn't know what to do with it
Hmm.
because on the other side of it, I'm still taking care of the kids. So
Right.
we're going out and he wants to stay out, and no was not an option. Like, no drinking, no drugs, nothing. It wasn't an option. He didn't allow it. And if at that point I'm so dependent on him and I'm so worried about him leaving me, which most people would want that to be the case, but I was stuck in it. It was like
Hmm.
being in quicksand. And it's the same person that put you in it. You think the same person's going to get you out of it. And part of it's the Stockholm syndrome.
Hmm.
And I write about that on my blog, on my
Hmm.
website.
Hmm.
And mhm,
So as you were there
mhm,
with these women, and I
yeah,
mean, I can't, the contrast between
mhm,
being, with your sisters, I have four sisters
yeah,
myself,
yes,
um, and being with these other quote unquote
mhm,
sisters,
yes.
did you have a visceral reaction to that?
No, because, well, the visceral reaction was like, wow, they want to be friends with me. They're so
Oh,
beautiful and they're so cool and they're so sexy and they're so kind, and they're working and they're successful women. I was the only stay-at-home mother in all the groups. I was the only one. And I was like fresh meat, so to speak. And they knew it. And the
and so they
person,
they were grooming you in a
oh,
sense.
absolutely. Well, he had already started.
Well, of
So
course.
yes, yeah. And so he was the ringleader of all of it. He made sure he and his friends made sure everyone had cocktails. I never made my own drinks. They all did. He made sure that he came with enough drugs for everybody. He made
Oh.
sure that he set the tone of the whole place. And there were people that were older than him, more successful, like really successful people. And he somehow managed to manipulate the whole scenario. It's just he's brilliant when it comes to that, honestly. And I have to give him kudos for that. Unfortunately, that power could be used for really good or really evil. And,
Mhm.
it was definitely done for evil.
I
Well,
recently interviewed a woman. The podcast, the episode
mhm,
hasn't come out yet,
mhm,
who talks about escaping from like narcissistic
yep,
relationships.
mhm,
And basically what you're describing is the exact same thing that she did.
correct. And so, well, that narcissism definitely shows up since I've left him,
Mm,
even to this day, because what is supposed to be legally owed to me is a fight. Everything's a fight,
mhm,
and everything's a threat, which is why you don't see me on a video anywhere. It's everything is a threat, and to protect myself and my safety of my children at this point, I have to do what I have to do for now. So,
Well,
going
let me
back,
ask you this,
go ahead.
as you're talking about
Mhm,
this, do
mhm.
you have any like any women's protection or
I,
any kind of, are there facilities or organizations?
absolutely,
Okay.
yes. So, Women Distress is who I ran to.
Mhm,
They're fantastic. There are definitely other organizations. There are groups now, Coalition Against Domestic Violence. There are a lot of groups now. There are a lot of Facebook groups now, Instagram groups, whatever it is that people can join. And it's not just about women. It's about children. It's about men, even all of
mhm,
that. Because let's honor those men that even emotionally get emotionally abused, which is of
mhm,
course what he's claiming. But without I have many journals that I wrote in, he didn't even realize it or know, and cards and even Facebook posts I would put in, and I just to show how much I loved this man, and I would have done anything, which obviously I did. So I'm going to go back a little bit and say that while some of this stuff is going on, I'm still taking care of those children. So no matter
Right.
how late we are out and how much sleep I did not get, I would still get up and make their breakfast and do their laundry and take them to school and do everything that I need to do as a mother while he was sleeping. And he would sleep until the next afternoon, wake up and do it all over again, want to do it all over
Oh,
again. And again, no is not an option. So, if I had slept 4 to 6 hours in a weekend, it was a good weekend. There was no sleeping.
and
Even when
now your children, they were pretty young at the time.
they were young, they were teenagers at the time, young teenagers
Did
for the most
they have any sort of sense that something wasn't quite right in the household? Or
part.
were you able to cover that?
I covered it as long as I could. This went on for 5 to 6 years. So, going again back or what have you further, in that dark tunnel, what ended up happening was he ended up trafficking me. So there was sex trafficking that was done. Um, he tried to say and convince me that it's everything that I wanted, that I wanted to do this or that. Um, and I can tell you flat out that is certainly not the case. No woman would ever want to be treated the way I was treated. I went through some moments that were very life threatening, um, choking to the point of passing out and strangulation and waking up and him still active, let's say, on top of me while I was passed out.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. And, certain things that were done to me, certain things he would say to me, some stuff that he recorded, he would want me to call him by other names and recorded me. So, he says he's got lots of evidence, but those pieces of evidence were set up. And I was in that cycle of, gaslighting, as we call it now, or confusion, or all of
mhm,
that, where I didn't know. It's like if you get thrown into a pool and it's really a whirlpool that's spinning, you don't know which end is up.
mhm,
And the one thing that grounded me was being a mother and a
mhm.
mother of two special needs kids. For me, no was not an option in being a parent. I still showed up for school meetings and I still fought for my children's rights and their education and all of that I had to do. I'm still doing that, even though they're
Mhm.
adults. And
So
and mhm,
did, pardon me for interrupting, but
yeah,
did anybody in your inner circle, like when you were going to
mhm,
still, watching over your kids, going to
mhm,
the school
mhm,
meetings and everything like that, did anybody
mhm,
in that circle even
mhm.
suspect that there was anything wrong?
So I always showed up looking like a mother when I needed to, because again, I'm grounded in who I am as far as that. Now I'm grounded in everything as far as who I am, but I was grounded in being a mother no matter what.
Mhm.
That I had a hard time having both of those children and I lost one in between, which is
I'm
why there's a gap.
sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. So, so there was no question about that. So I showed up to school and I was spot on. I brought notes and forms and advocates and doctors. I had a team for each child, and still relatively do as much as they'll let me because they're adults. I had a team and I was in charge of that team, and so that never changed. It was as if I was living very, very different lives.
Well, that had
And
to be exhausting.
it was exhausting. I'm still exhausted from it. It was exhausting. It
Mhm.
was. And I just kept going and I just kept going and I just kept going because I had to. Somebody had to hold the roof up. And that was me.
So what finally, what triggered that I'm not doing this anymore? That time that you went, as you said, from the
Right.
floor to the door, which I think that's
Right.
a great, I just love
Thank
that. That's
you.
so descriptive.
Thank you.
So what happened?
So what happened was, you asked me about my friends. I'm going to answer that first.
Okay.
So what I heard after I left was that some of my friends saw some of the Facebook stuff that, pictures of being out. And they said that they thought, this was going on, but it really was this. And they saw a part of me where they said that they were concerned, but nobody confronted me. Nobody really said, hey, because it seemed like I was so attached to him that even if someone did say something, I would stand up for him. I kept
Mm.
everything very private. I didn't tell anyone what was going on. I didn't,
Yes.
and I kept it all within because, you know, we had these group of friends. And at some point, the friends started going against me because
Mhm.
I might have said the wrong thing to a person, or they realized that he wanted to go further deep in, which was, I don't know where you go from there, right? And I wasn't okay with that. I was starting to get stronger and push back. And then I started to work for a couple of months in the end and ended up realizing I needed to put my own money aside. And once he found that out, everything got bad. It got really scary, even scarier than it was before. At this point, I'm sleeping on the floor of a room, you know, on a mattress, little twin mattress, and he's, you know, busting in the door or whatever it was. I know. And so what made me leave was my closest friends had come to visit. And this is a childhood friend who's also in the legal system,
Mm.
who was offered drugs, who was told that things were done illegally on like credit forms or what have you for loans. And I had lost about 20 pounds in 3 months and I didn't even know
Mhm.
why.
Mhm.
I mean, there was stuff going in my body, going through my body that I couldn't identify with. Like I saw my behavior change. You know, Eckhart Tolle says there's that space of awareness, and
Mhm.
there is that behavior, and that space of awareness is like which one is the real you kind of thing. I could
Wow.
almost see myself and feel it, and I couldn't maintain my emotions, and I couldn't understand why because that's not who I was. And I knew that, and then so my best friend had said something to me like, "This is not okay. What's going on here is not okay." And she had to go back to where she lived, and then again, things got even worse. And I stopped going out with him. I stopped anything. I went to an attorney, and when he found out that I did that, then it's like it kept escalating, and I got really scared. And because at this point, people are kind of they're trying to connect with me. They're reaching out to me, saying stuff to me that's inappropriate. And I realize at this point, and he's saying things that are not true, trying to say, you signed this paper, you did this. And I was like, no, I didn't. I would have remembered. And you know, now we're at like almost 20 years of marriage or maybe more. And so this person knows everything about me. And
Oof.
there's also in the field of information, so knows everything. There are no secrets. Has cards with my handwriting. Well, who can't trace that? So nothing was, I mean, again, every form of domestic abuse that could happen was happening. And I knew that if I didn't get out, I wouldn't be alive in a week or two. I knew it.
Oh.
I could see it in my mirror. And for the sake of my kids, I tried to get my kids to come with me. And I knew 2 years before this that I wanted to leave. And my kids wouldn't leave. They wouldn't leave their stuff. They wouldn't leave their pets. They wouldn't leave because he didn't do anything to them. I mean, he did because they witnessed a lot. They witnessed him
Mhm.
coming home drunk. My son and I would go looking for him to get him in the car so he wouldn't drive home. I mean, there were things that they witnessed. You know, there's a hole in my wall. There's just stuff that happened. But for the most part, I knew that they were going to be okay. Or I needed to get out to save myself. And then I'm going to come in and I'm going to save them.
Mhm.
And I did that. I left with nothing and I went to a safe place. And what happened was I was detoxing from something. We don't know what. I was afraid to go to the emergency room because they would take my child away if they found anything in my system. I mean, I was really, really scared. And that family that I was alienated from really wrapped their arms around me. You know, of course, and then everyone came. We never liked him. We knew that he was, you know, a thief. We knew that he was doing this. Like everyone in my life, everyone,
Mhm.
except for the people that he called to say that I was a drug addict and alcoholic and I was cheating on him his whole marriage. Oh yeah.
Jeez.
So, and here it was, I was like making holiday dinners and having the 20, 25 people over. And like, I couldn't hide that. Like, how could you do that? I mean, even my kids are like, that makes no sense. And he was
Mhm.
telling my children all the stories. And, my oldest one, wants his father to be his hero. And my younger one would look at him like, what are you talking about? You know, because I would have kids over my house. Well, how can you do that if you're actively doing crafts with children and, all of that and making them snacks with faces on them? You can't do that stuff and be inebriated. You just can't. There's no way
Mhm.
around it. You can't hide that. And you can't hide it from kids because kids are just sharp, especially now. Thank
Mhm.
God they are.
Mhm.
And, it wasn't until I went to Women Distress, which I did, I want to say like a month later after I left. I was told to go to a psychiatrist because I still couldn't regulate my emotions. I was so, I mean, I heard the episode that you did on CPTSD. I was
Mhm.
listening to that earlier.
Mhm.
I mean, talk about nervous system deregulation.
Mhm.
I never knew what to expect.
Mhm.
I never knew who was going to come in the door. We would go out for a wonderful evening, or so he would say. I didn't know that I would end up at somebody's house waking up in the middle of the night, not knowing where I was. I didn't know that when he took me to a hotel for, an overnight, let's get away, that at some point he would say, I'm going to go down to the bar, get a drink. He'd come in with somebody else.
Oh.
And so there were a lot of times when I was in a physical space with himself and a friend, or himself and somebody else, and a security by the door, and I couldn't get out. And it was like, here, do this to her, do that to her, do this to her, make her, he'd make me do this. And yeah. And I physically couldn't leave. I was shushed, hands over my mouth. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that went on. And I don't always remember it. It comes out like every day there's something new. And along with that comes, the body does keep the score. The nervous system's always in fight, flight, or fawn.
Mhm.
And, when I left, my goal was to financially be independent. He told everybody he wasn't going to give anything to me, and he basically does not, or it's a fight for very little. I went back to my healthcare world after being out of it for a very, very long time, which
Wow,
was
that takes a
scary.
lot
Yeah,
of courage.
it
Yeah,
is.
right?
It is. I mean, the technology alone, and even still,
Right.
like I don't, even though I have so much experience in everything, that I'm not chosen first, or I don't get paid as much as I could have because I did step out of it. And
Mhm.
people are younger now.
Mhm.
I'm in the retiring age, but I'm
Mhm.
just starting all over again, which is really not great. So, but
But I mean,
I
I'm sorry, again, I'm
it's
gonna
okay.
interrupt you, but that just
Sure.
speaks to the amount of courage and determination and
Mm,
grit that you really have, that inner
absolutely.
strength. That's why I keep calling you a
Thank
warrior. I
you.
mean,
Thank
that
you.
is the true spirit of a warrior.
Yeah, well, I was determined. I mean, not only for myself, but I have two kids, and I
Mhm.
have my youngest is a female, um, and she's got courage too. She came out as being openly gay 2 years
Mhm.
ago.
Mhm.
My house is still the house that all the kids come in if they want love, if they want a mom's hug, if they want advice, they come here. My
Mhm.
oldest one, he's a little bit brainwashed and what have you, but he still sees me as the same mom. He comes
Mhm.
here for dinner. He sees me working hard. I've worked on him. He sees me healing other people in my job, in my career. And, I could be having a panic attack while I'm working on a patient. And
Mhm.
I've had to learn how to manage that. Yeah, you mean you're in the healthcare. So I've had to learn how to manage that,
Mhm.
and therapies and things like that. So, the East and the Western medicine, I love the
Mhm.
combination of the two.
Mhm.
And, every day is an opportunity for me to learn more so that I can help other people. And I've been doing
Mhm.
that. I mean, I was still doing that even amongst all this. We'd be at events or a party, or, somebody's after party, quote unquote. And, if I saw somebody who was sad or what have you, I'd be sitting in a corner with another woman or a couple trying to give them marriage advice, and they loved it. But then they realized, like, I don't belong in this group, which is why
Mhm.
they wanted me out, because nobody
Mhm.
wants that, at that hour. But
Right.
so that was part of it. But yeah, I was determined, and I still am. Now I'm determined to help people on a really grandiose level because there's so much trauma and pain. And I
Mm.
always say trauma is like a number line, it goes from 0 to infinity. And it could be somebody being bullied in school. I was
Mhm.
overweight my whole life until a certain age. So I understand that. That's where my insecurities come from. Um, and so, again, it could be anything. I
Mhm.
just saw the movie that's out, which was unbelievable. It's called The Sounds of Freedom. They're
I've
offering free.
seen that. Yes, I've
Okay,
seen it advertised. I
right,
haven't seen it
and
yet.
they're offering free tickets because sex trafficking is rampant in our world now, everywhere.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it was happening to me. And I lived in a very prestigious suburban home neighborhood. Nobody knew. I
Mhm.
got up. I was PTA president. I walked my dog. I was a community involved.
Mhm.
I had people over my home. I went to other people's homes, but they didn't know after their event that he would say, "Let's go here." They didn't know that he was doing, cocaine in the bathroom.
Mhm.
And, I had to be involved in that.
Mhm.
And if not, I mean, I'll never forget there was one birthday party we went to, and it was a great friend who I hadn't seen. And, I loved her and her kids. And, I'm there. And he said, "Come here." And I tried to fight. And there was shame and there was guilt always when I fought back. And he's like, come here. And, there's like 100 people in this house, and there was nothing I could do. And, we went in the bathroom and he insisted on the drugs. And he's like, "Well, we're going to do this after." And I was like, I need to go home. I don't want to do this anymore. And I left the bathroom and we went outside and everyone's having a great time. And, there's such an isolated feeling in domestic violence, even if it's
Mhm.
emotional abuse. And if somebody's shaming or guilting you, there's so much isolation because here it is. It's everyone's having a great time around me. And I look like I was, at least standing with a smile because I know how to do that and stand in grace. And nobody had a clue as to what I was going through. And I remember he said a few words. He goes, "Let's go. We're leaving." And, it's when those episodes happened, I wouldn't get talked to for 2 days, or it would be just very harsh words.
Mhm.
Go in his room and watch TV for a day and a half while I was out helping the kids and doing what I was doing, running errands and things. And it was tough. It was really tough. It was, again, very isolated. I didn't have my family. And, but my family doesn't, they even still, they don't know from any of this.
Mhm.
It's still hard
Well,
to hear.
that's
Mhm.
part of the whole control and manipulation,
Yeah, absolutely.
is to separate you from your
Mhm.
family, your friends, the things
Yes.
that keep you grounded, the things that you love to do, because then that you depend more and more on the abuser.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's definitely, they have the books, the narcissist playbook and all of those.
Right.
Ironically, he bought one for someone else that we know. And it's funny because I've listened to it and bits and pieces of it, and it is as if he read it and took notes. And between that and The Art of War, I will tell you that he knows those two books almost verbatim and has been using them on me. Now, I'm
Wow.
one woman who was, stay-at-home mother, healthcare worker, special needs kids, special needs advocate. I would, speak for in support groups with other parents, after bringing a spread of, food and, whatever it is. That's who I am. You know, Going to the grocery store and making sure somebody knows that they're doing such a great job, and I'm so grateful. The bathroom attendants at the airports or in the restaurants. He'd be at the bar making friends or in the men's bathroom for half an hour doing God only knows what, and I'd be talking to the attendant about her children, and giving her my last $20 because,
Mhm.
people in this world need that. They need
Mhm.
that minute of connection and gratitude. And that's who I am. That's why I'm saying I'm very grounded in who I am and I know who I am. And my kids know that
Mhm.
even more so, which is really important. And they follow suit. They're exactly the same way. And
Wow.
I always told them it's not what they do in life, it's who they are as human beings. And I'm very lucky that despite everything, despite what they've seen and heard and experienced, that they're such great humans. as well as their friends are. And that's
Mhm.
just, it's a special thing. It really is.
Wow. Well, you're a very gracious person as well,
Thank you. I appreciate
and
that.
forgiving, I would say.
I'm working on the forgiveness part. I really am. But it's everyone has their story, including, those that abused me. And
Mm,
I can feel sorry for them and I can bless them and love them from afar. Because I
mhm,
think that's, I heard it a long time ago on Oprah, your greatest gift is forgiving somebody else.
mhm.
Because what? I'm going to give him the poison, but I'm going to feel it myself or whatever it is.
Right.
I've had enough poison put in my body without knowing
Yeah.
what it was. So I'm working on the forgiveness part. Part of it's because I don't remember a lot of it. Or, like I said, after seeing this movie, Sounds of Freedom, I'm going to push it a little bit because it's so important.
Mhm,
It was unbelievably disturbing, but it was also very enlightening to what's
mhm,
going on. And sex trafficking looks very different for in every situation. Abuse looks
mhm,
different. Autism looks different. All of it. Um, and I think that we as human beings need to know because
mhm,
we all have children or grandchildren or nieces and nephews, and it's even the boys, even
mhm,
men, you
mhm,
know because working, pushing, like we were talking about the massages, that person who was giving him the massage is probably somebody who was trafficked, and it could have been labor trafficking, and
mhm,
that's a huge deal also. And
mhm,
it's those people that I also want to help, in addition to the people that have, very mild issues of trauma.
mhm.
And
And just as you
mhm,
said, though, every the trafficking looks different,
yeah,
and there's so many different types, and every
absolutely.
case is a little bit different, but it all has that same common thread or theme
Hmm.
is control over
Yeah,
another human being, and
yes,
that is so wrong.
it is. It's control and power. Absolutely.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Absolutely. I mean, even now, for me to have to fight for what's legally mandated for me is it's his sense of control and power,
Right.
and it's the people that think they're above the law. It's people
Right.
that think that they can get away with anything and that are possibly getting away with anything they want. And it's really challenging because sometimes the legal system doesn't always offer the assistance that's necessary.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so that can be a fight, but there are a lot of organizations. I mean, Women in Distress has an entire legal system.
Mhm.
Again, a lot of these domestic violence groups, sex trafficking, it's it's becoming so large now that there are people that will go to court for you, will go to bat. I mean, I've advocated in the sense that I've gone to the hospitals to speak for the victim
Mhm.
because, like I've said before, when a victim is in that scene, they're usually out of control and hysterical in some form, or they're just blank. It's one or the other.
Mhm.
They're talking so rapidly that the person thinks that they're drugged or on something or whatever it is, and especially with a police officer.
Mhm.
Depending on the level of awareness and education that the police officer has, and I'm going to grant them the respect and the grace, depending on that level of understanding. They'll either be very, very accommodating and empathetic, or they'll think that the victim is out of their mind. And I've seen both
Mhm.
sides. So that's why I like to be able to be in that position, to be in the middle and
Mhm.
advocate, because I understand the health part of it and I understand the legal part of it. I've been
Mhm.
I've had patients that have been abused where they didn't tell me, but I identified it because I
You
emotionally
know.
and yes, of course, emotionally and physically, because I'm trained in that.
Mhm.
And I've also been on the side of telling a police officer where I know that I sounded hysterical.
Mhm.
And even though I had documentation and proof, I was so heightened. I was in that fight mode that
Mhm.
please help me. And it's really sad. But you would think with all the movies and TV shows are out there, but
Mhm.
there are as many false accusations probably as much as there are true
Mhm.
accusations,
Mhm.
and
Which
they
is
have to.
really sad and
It is
frustrating
it
for
is
those who
it
have
is
been victimized, truly
correct,
victimized.
correct,
I think there's a special,
right.
dare I say, a special place in hell for people who do that, because then
Well,
that actually
yeah,
invalidates a lot of the people.
absolutely. Of
Mhm.
course, and I've gotten that,
Mhm.
and
Well, yeah, you had
so
the perfect life.
right, exactly, so to speak, from the outside in.
Right, from the
And it
outside.
was for a while because I created it. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes they say that the woman, sets the temperature of the home. And I set it up pretty comfortable, like too comfortable, obviously. I mean, he didn't really have to do a thing because
Wow.
that was my love language. We can go into the whole relationship part of it too. I've experienced quite a bit of a lot in life.
Right.
So I can explain all of that too. And
So
because, and
now,
that also can be used against you.
is there any communication between the
No,
2 of you? Or okay, so
absolutely not. No, no.
is it through a legal
Yeah, so I tried to get a restraining order when I was in the throes of all of this, and they wouldn't give it. I'll never forget waiting hours and hours, scared to death. Oh yeah, and I couldn't get it. I even said what he has in the home, which was drugs, guns, all of that, and
great combination?
yeah, exactly, and it's still in that home in a safe, and I couldn't get them to do it. And that's what happens. I wasn't with women distress at that point, and by the time I was with women in distress, it's funny because I never used the words domestic violence, not for myself, because I was one of those. Well, he doesn't hit my face, not yet. Slapping in bed and strangling in bed and rupturing parts of my body. That wasn't domestic violence. That was just him being rough in sex. That's what I was
Oh,
told by him. By him. So it wasn't until I sat down with she was the what do you call it? When you go in, you get evaluated. She was the intake person for me at Women Distress, and she was an ex KGB, you know, officer. Yeah, and I was a little scared for myself. But she says, this is you're a victim of domestic violence. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's just, he just had me do these things, and again, still protecting. I was still brainwashed.
isn't that incredible?
Yeah, it
Wow.
took me a good 6 months to a year to really accept that.
Well, like you
Really,
said, Stockholm Syndrome.
oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
did. And it took me two different organizations that
Wow.
I'd gone to where it was those that, have studied, have specialized in domestic violence, the director of programs that would sit me down and say, listen, you know, so, sometimes even today, I still, have to make the distinction of, this wasn't right. And, obviously I know that it wasn't right because the stuff keeps coming up. Um, but
Wow.
forgetting the good stuff.
Yeah.
Because, like any abuser, I always say 4 days on, 3 days off. 4 days, he was wonderful. Come home with flowers, or, let's go to a nice dinner. And then it was just a nice dinner. Let's go to a movie and hang out. Right. Let's
Yeah.
cuddle and watch TV. But then those 3 days, and that's where the spinning in that whirlpool I'm talking about, and you're
Yeah.
drowning and you don't know which end is up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know which end was up. So I have to, I have family photos. We look like a great family, and we were parts of it, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I didn't know that, there were certain websites he was looking at on his work computer that were found out by other people, you know. Yeah, anything was available to him. He wanted anything and everything. And so I stay very clear.
Mhm.
I stay very clear. I realize that my health, physically,
Mhm.
mentally, financially, is as important as anything else. And of course, my children as well.
So it
I,
seems like you have really learned how
oh,
to establish and
yeah,
maintain good
yeah. And
boundaries.
I have, and it's still challenging. I mean, even now,
Sure.
um, dating someone, there's a trust factor and all of
Sure, I'll
that. And
bet.
oh my gosh. And it's, we become hyper independent.
Mhm.
Whereas, they say that that's a trauma, experience as a trauma result is I don't need help from anyone. No, but I
Mhm.
don't need anything. I can do this on my own. And, there's somewhere in the middle. And I, quite frankly, am still learning that. And it might take me a lot of years
Mhm.
because I went from my parental home, being the
Mhm.
youngest of so many, to
Mhm.
that home, which was great in the beginning. But again, I've had people say, we noticed this, this, and this. but you always
Mhm.
seemed happy, they would tell me. You always seemed happy. You seemed so in love. You were the couple that we thought would make it forever. I was jealous of your life. That's what people would tell me, but they had no idea. Parts of it
Wow.
were great, like I said, but I didn't know. They weren't great because I didn't know what he was doing outside the home, but they presented themselves as that.
Mhm.
So,
So, when did you decide
mm,
to create this program, the from the
mhm.
floor to the door?
I would say, so all of this happened right before COVID, my leaving,
Yeah.
and going back to work as a healthcare worker, and then, of course, shutting down. So here I am in my own place, and my daughter's only with me half the time. And when things started opening up, he was out. He was out at, the strip clubs and the restaurants and all of that, the bars, and she's 50-50, and it was so scary. Um, so my anxiety level was beyond anything I'd ever experienced in my life, even more so than when I was with him, because when I was with him, he made sure I was numb
Mhm.
emotionally, like on internally and physically. I mean, I found even like numbing cream and stuff in his closet when I left, and pills and stuff I didn't know that he had. Yeah, I mean, trust me. Um, they say women can become like FBI agents.
Mhm.
Well, I knew that I had to be, in order to figure out what had happened to me emotionally and physically, because I didn't know. So here I am. I'm sitting in anxiety. I'm no longer able to work and make money. I'm no longer able to work, which had become my outlet of, helping people and being around normal, quote unquote, people, and being able to give empathy and, to give and get love, and that pure natural love that humans can
Mhm.
give to one another, which is so beautiful. When
Mhm.
we knock out the ego, it's a really beautiful
Mhm.
connection. And I'm by myself a lot because I was only given, it was 50-50. Um,
Mhm.
and then we got divorced through Zoom, which after 20 something years, oh yeah. And we couldn't even be in the same quote unquote room in the Zoom because I couldn't do it. I didn't want to do it. Yeah. And you would ask about communication. We were only using a parenting app, which I would recommend anyone having gone through divorce, going through or having gone, because those emails cannot be erased. They are actually edited, meaning if you are saying something that is harsh or accusatory, it will not send it. You have to actually change the wording, which when we first used it, that was not available. And the things that he said to me were sent to my lawyers and his lawyers. I mean, it was horrible. It was horrible. So, um, so during COVID, I'm sitting here and I was journaling like crazy, which I'm sure so many people were. I was
Mhm.
walking 3 to 4 times a day. I started riding my bike. I mean, it was like whatever I can get out of my physical body, that angst,
Mhm.
I did. So in the writing, here it is. I'm sad. I'm anxious. I'm scared to death. I'm back on that floor. I'm I'm crying. Back in the day when I was with him, the floor was my safe spot. Mostly, it was where I'd cry and he'd go to bed. I'd hide in my closet. I'd pass out on the floor from whatever was given to me. I'd pretend to pass out on the floor so nobody would come near me. I would get sick because my body's not meant to have any of those things in it. Um, I would pretend I was sick so nobody would come near me. Pretending to be sleeping was very big for me. I learned how to really master that. Yeah. Um, and so it pretty much speaks for itself. I went from the floor to the door, and it came to me very quickly because that's the story that I lived. So,
Mhm.
I started writing, and there's a book I'm working on. The first one is from the floor to the door. The second
Yeah.
one is very similar. Um, it's the second half of where I'm at now, this kind of transition phase.
Mhm.
Um, my youngest is about to go to college, so I will be an empty nester for the first time ever. And, we talked about how we were going to live at this stage in our lives. And ironically, he's living it. He's living a glorious life. I'm still in the mud. I'm still, working with my child who's going to college and she's freaking out. And I'm doing, all that stuff that we do before our kids
Right.
go away. Either you have a child or you've seen another one going through
Mhm.
that. It is not easy. And with their issues that they have, my kids still have. I'm the one
Mhm.
still working on that. And he's living his great life, you know, going out, having my kids pull out money for him, going to
Yeah, I
the
still think though, I
yeah,
believe in the
yeah,
power of what goes around
yeah.
comes around. And when
Everyone
it,
says that. Yeah,
yeah, and when
everyone
it
says that.
comes around, it's gonna
Yeah,
knock them out.
yeah, I know. And listen, I wish everyone the best as long as they stay away from me. All of them.
Mhm.
Everyone I
Mhm.
walked away from. I have no intention on mentioning anyone's names. I have no intention on hurting anyone. My journey is not about anyone else but myself
But yourself.
and
Mhm.
possibly my kids. And my kids have their own stories from the
Mhm.
issues that they were born with,
Mhm.
to my daughter, coming out in her own journey, my
Mhm.
son and his physical and emotional issues, and how they've both overcome all of it. And, dealing with what they thought was a perfect life also. And in the end, my ex was out of control and he would shout things and he'd get drunk and want to wake them up. And, I'd go into my daughter's room to get away from him and he would follow me in there and start yelling at me where I'd have to call someone to have on speaker to have either proof or to tell him to stop. And, so that's what motivates me is just them. Yeah.
Wow. So do you get, I'm guessing I already know the answer to this, because I did check out your website, which it's a beautiful website, and some
Mhm.
of the blog posts that
Thank
you've written, which I
you.
know is probably going to be, part of the
Yeah,
first book, if not the second one. But do
absolutely.
you have some sort of, therapeutic benefits from doing the writing? Do you have some almost like a catharsis?
Absolutely. I always have. I've always put pen to paper. And it's funny because now I'm kind of cleaning up all of the stuff because once my daughter moves, I'm moving and I'm looking back thinking, first of all, wow, all I did was write about him. Like for anyone to ever say to me that I was like cheating, whatever, I'm thinking of myself, he doesn't even know it. I'm like, wow, I really wanted to be happy and, be with a partner and live our lives and do great things in this world. And, now I'm going to do what I am doing it. And, whatever's meant to be, I think is already meant to be.
Mhm.
But writing is the answer, I would say, for
Mhm.
anybody. I'm very old school and I love to work with my hands. And, it's funny because I've looked back in the time of when I had just left him
Mhm.
to now, even my handwriting was different.
Oh, I'll bet.
Oh, unbelievable. I looked at some of it and it's hard to read. It's
Mhm.
hard to read, it's hard to look at, and I could see that I had no control. It's interesting to me how the handwriting was big and it was sloppy and it was like as if somebody has gotten, sick with words kind of, if you eat
Mhm.
something and you're sick, so you're just like sick with words. And it was all of that stuff coming out.
Wow.
And there were parts of it where, my handwriting was quote unquote perfect, and then it wasn't again. And I'm a perpetual note taker. Listening to your podcast earlier, and anytime I listen to a pod, I have to have like 4 or 5 journals on my bed.
Mhm.
My dogs use them as pillows. I have workbooks. I'm working on my own workbook that I want to create. So absolutely, writing has been a huge deal for me. I
Mhm.
put different pieces on my website, and I'm a little bit behind on that, to be honest, because I am still trying to, get my daughter ready for college, and
Right.
with her
Right.
emotions that are coming out and her own trauma I'm working with, and even like some of her friends that are coming over, and all the stuff that they're going through. So
Mhm.
we're like celebrating, the ending of school here and how they're all going to be separating. So, I try and be that mom that does all that for them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't help but go back in time and think of the young woman who was
Mm,
proposed to,
mm,
after dating this guy for 6 months. I
yeah.
mean,
Not even, yeah.
yeah, what would you tell that woman now if
I
you could?
mean, run,
Run.
run as fast as you can.
Mhm.
I didn't even answer when he first, I was in shock, as you can imagine. I mean, he's asking me in front of 100 people,
Wow.
what do you say? I was shocked. I mean, we had talked about it, like most couples, and I was young, and and I said nothing. And I could hear the whispers and all that. And it had been like almost 2 minutes, and I didn't answer. Right then, I should have known. Right then.
Mhm.
Now we know. We're more aware.
Mhm.
And that's what I like about social media is
Mhm.
that there's a lot of awareness. The
Mhm.
podcasts are phenomenal. I think that
Mhm.
podcast hosts, you guys are changing the world,
Mhm.
bringing the awareness, not only your own lessons and experiences, but all of us that have been out there in the
Mhm.
world and done different things and experienced them and come out the other side. I would say run, but I was talking to my family last night and after getting off the phone with the attorney, and I said, the only thing is that my children wouldn't be here. And, my kids have changed lives. You
Right.
know, my youngest is a human rights activist lobbying for
Oh.
women's rights. My older one with his issues, he helps, he's empathetic to women that are sad about their boyfriends or whatever,
Mhm.
So, I mean, so I have to go on that. That was meant
Mhm.
to happen. My
Mhm.
story was meant to happen so that I can help other people. And everyone I know says they wouldn't have come out the other end. They
Mhm.
wouldn't have survived it
Mhm.
because I had the option to stay. He didn't want me to leave. Why would he? I was the one
Right.
who was taking care of the house during the day, and then I was his pawn at night. I
Wow.
was his collateral. He'd pull me and the drugs out of a pocket and say, "Here, this is what I have to offer you. You can enter me into this part." Because I looked the part with the hair and the outfits, and because there was a requirement from him, and there was a requirement for the people to have to look a certain way.
Wow.
And it was like, here's what I have to offer, because otherwise, by himself, he's got nothing to offer.
Right.
Let's be honest. You know, Nothing. Because anyone that does that to the mother of their children and to a person, a human being,
Mhm.
what do they have to offer? Nothing.
Mhm.
And, we can sugarcoat it as much as we want. We can make excuses. But, when somebody puts you on a table and make sure everyone in the room is to the point where you can't even see straight, here's my wife for you.
Oh.
She's been taking care of our kids all day long, and she will tomorrow. But this is now, and this is what you have. Yeah, I mean, what, you know, yeah,
Oh, I
I
can't.
know. I know. It's funny because to me, again, when you talk about something, you can talk about on an intellectual level or
Mhm.
emotional level.
Mhm.
And most of the time, I really try and stay into the intellectual part of my brain,
Mhm.
and that is in two parts of the brain I have learned, which is why when we have nightmares, our memories go from one side of the brain to the other. And then
Mhm.
if we have, a cocktail or something that relaxes us, someone takes medication, somebody does. I do a lot of meditation. I've done Reiki, all of that, and
Mhm.
that stuff. When you do yoga and then you're in savasana, I mean, I would bawl,
Mhm.
and it's because your brain has gone from one, your thoughts have gone from one side to the other, and
Mhm.
and so I try and stay into the intellectual part of it. When I see and hear the reactions from others, that's when I realize how bad it was.
Mhm.
It's like
Yeah,
anything
I'm,
else.
and
When you're in the thick of it, you don't realize it.
right. And I'm sorry, I know I've given you
It's
some amazing
okay.
facial expressions
It's
along the way.
okay. That's
So,
okay. Listen,
yeah,
I honor that as well. And,
Mm.
I don't, I've lost a lot of friendships because the friends I went back to, which were the ones that, I knew from our kids being in school together or from the
Mhm.
organizations, it's a little, that's the tough part for anyone that suffered really bad trauma. You don't want to sit and talk about this at girls' night
Mhm.
out or, at a sisterhood women's group bingo night. You just you can't, and there's a little bit of that isolation again, even though you're on
Mhm.
the other side of that healing rainbow, I call it,
Mhm.
it's still in there. In this movie, The Sounds of Freedom, it's about a brother and a sister.
Mhm.
And I believe the sister ends up being 11 years old in the end. And I don't want to give the movie away, but they show her before she was
Oh,
taken, and they show her, I'm going to say they show her during, the during having been
right.
taken, and she's trafficked, And, you could see she's a different person, even at that
Mhm.
young age, because she's been there for, I think, a few years. I'm not really sure. I
Mhm.
don't remember.
I
And
can't
I can identify with that. I could identify with how I was before all of this and how I am now.
I
And
can't remember. Oh, I'm sorry, but I can't remember if it was a story I read somewhere, or I think it might have been one of my podcast
Mhm,
guests one time was
mhm,
talking about trafficking and trauma and such. And she said that there was one mom, whose
mhm,
child was actually trafficked for
mhm,
only 3
mhm,
days.
mm.
Only, I'm using air quotes
Only,
here.
yeah, yeah, I understand.
But they found her fairly
Mhm,
quickly, and when
mhm,
the mom went to the hospital to see her for the
mhm,
first time, she didn't
mhm.
recognize her as her child.
Yes,
In
exactly.
3 days, that's how
Yeah,
much the trauma changed her.
absolutely, absolutely. And right, and so I had it for about 6 years.
Oh my god.
And I put on a really good mask when I went into school. But it really wasn't a mask when I went into the schools and I volunteered and I went to the school meetings. That's the real me. Really, the mask was when I went out. You
Right,
know, and a part of my brain was like, oh, maybe that's the real you, because you want to be like this is not in your head you want to just justify it and like
right.
realize, oh, maybe because then it's like, oh, maybe you do want it. What he's saying is like really it's unbelievable what happens. And again, that's the Stockholm syndrome piece that I wrote on my
Mhm,
website.
mhm.
And because a lot of people said, why did you stay? Or even after I left, I got in touch with a couple of people. It really did hurt me. And I even said, back now a year later, like, why would I do that? And I used to get ashamed of myself and the guilt. And then I realized there is that sort of control that they still have, because I was also promised, like some of the guys I thought were like my brothers. We don't, we hate him. We'll protect you from him, because they didn't realize until I told some of the stuff that went on in our own private bedroom
Mhm.
that they didn't know. So nobody knew everything. All the different groups didn't know about each other, and nobody knew what was going on privately. Nobody. And
Wow,
nobody knew what was happening. Yeah. The emails that he would send me, and yeah, and some of the texts, right? Nobody knew that, just me.
wow.
And um, so the Stockholm syndrome is huge. And
Mhm,
watching the movie, Sounds of Freedom, I could see how that also plays out, especially when it comes to young children. And
mhm,
I've said this before, my ex-husband knew all of my insecurities. We were together for so many years.
mhm.
That's my partner, that's my teammate, it's us against the world, that sort of thing. So of course, after all those years, it's like a best friend. Do you know everything about your best friend?
Mhm.
Well, when he tells all your insecurities to everybody else and
Oof. Mhm.
exploits them to me, and then exploits to everyone around me, they knew what to work with.
Jeez.
So it's as if they were dealing with a child. Because
Mhm,
if you have, stuff from your childhood and they mention it, it's as if they're dealing with an 11-year-old. So when
mhm.
I saw the movie, now I'm sitting in a movie theater, nobody knows my story. Nobody. And everyone's like, oh my God. And they're gasping. And I thought to myself, I could understand exactly how this person is thinking, or that one is thinking, or that child is thinking. I know what it's like. Granted, it's very different. And I mean, it's horrific when you talk about children. I just,
Mhm,
that's what drives me too. Because I want
mhm,
to be on that other side for them,
mhm.
to welcome them with open arms and to help provide shelter for them and
Mhm.
therapies for them and love on them. That's my goal. That's my big, big dream.
Jeez.
So because I could see it in the faces, I could when again they showed that girl and she looked different, because I thought to myself, I don't look like I did in the pictures before all this happened. And I got out of the marriage, and I knew I had to go to work. So what did I do? I went to work and worked my tail off and to support myself.
Mhm.
And I almost went into, well, I did. What ended up happening was my job became very abusive. I was taking advantage of my hours and the fact that I could do so much and I was so competent, because stay-at-home moms, boy, we can run a small world, because we're
Yes.
running a small world. And now we're out in the real world. There's nothing we can't do. There's
Mhm.
nothing. The software and technology is a little bit iffy, but there's nothing we can't do. There's no emergency that we cannot handle, right?
Mhm.
We know how
Absolutely.
we know how to do it on an intellectual, emotional, and physical level. We can
Mhm.
ground ourselves and just take charge. And I'm trained in medical emergencies, so I've stopped at many accidents or people having seizures and what have you, and whatever. So the point is that for the last 5 years since I've left, I've been in that survival mode, like they talk about, and you know, getting to the point where I can financially support myself, take care of my kids as much as I needed to. Having my daughter here, not getting child support, saying that he can't afford it because he has his own business and a lot of his money that he makes is it's in cash, so to speak. I'll let you guys figure that out. So, I'm doing what I can. And I got to the point where I was so emotionally and physically exhausted because my boss took so much advantage of my, abilities, that I had to leave the same way I had to leave my marriage. And I didn't recognize it until the end. Everyone else did. Even my own patients did. Everyone else
Wow.
did. And and I realized that there's a pattern there. So I've taken some time to really think about that because we
Mhm.
don't realize the abuse can look so different, so
Mhm.
different. And sometimes we put ourselves in those situations. I honor that. I recognize that. And yeah, the boundaries are a big thing now for me.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of taking a breath because, like I said, I left and went right into survival mode. I was gone for a month. I went right back to work, like I said, in the same field that I was gone for so long.
Mhm.
And it was very healing in the beginning. It was
Mhm.
still scary. When my youngest turned 18, we celebrated like nobody's business. We celebrated her becoming an adult, and I
Mhm.
celebrated the fact that I survived those 4 years. I
Wow.
survived. I was threatened of everything. I mean, she's got issues that came out. I was threatened of having Munchausen syndrome, of being a bad mother, of being an addict, of bringing men into my house, which everybody knows that's not allowed. My place is so girly anyway, but it's just all of these things that, the other parent does. It's not
Mhm.
just women. I mean, men.
Mhm.
Some women do that too. I know a
Mhm.
couple of really great dads where the ex-wife or the mothers are threatening them. And it doesn't matter. It looks horrible for anyone. It's just a horrible thing to do to the other parent.
Mhm.
Really is. Because they're still the parent of your child. That's why I'll always wish him well, because he's still the parent of my children.
You're a better person than I am.
I I understand that. And
I
that's what got
mean,
me in trouble. Let's be honest, that's what got me in trouble.
uh-huh.
It really is. And they knew that. They knew
So
that. But I
one
have to, because I've thought about, to just finish the statement is,
Mhm.
I mean, my ex had medical problems. And with the problems that he had that I took care of him for, one would think that he would stop all that he's doing because it's gonna hit one day.
Right.
And my children and I have talked about it, and they know I will be the first one there to help with anything that needs to be done in any sense, but more so for them, so that they know their mother didn't abandon them if, God forbid, something happens.
Mhm.
That I was there to really support them. And if that means supporting him and his family, that were my family for, very many years,
Mhm.
then I'm going to do that because because that's what good humans do. That's what good
Mhm.
people do. So go ahead, ask
So
me.
Michelle, I mean, it's been an honor to speak with you. It's been amazing having you on the show. I mean, I
Thank
think you are
you.
an incredible person. Again, you
Thank
truly
you.
are a warrior. I want to send you one of my swords just as a
Oh
token.
my gosh.
But you really do have,
My son would absolutely love what you've got going on back there.
yeah, I'm
He
sure.
was he was a little taekwondo dude when, he was little. It was the best thing to ever
Nice.
see. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I was pretty late to martial arts. I was 47 when I
Yeah.
started, and
I've
man, it
I've
changed
definitely
my
thought about it.
life.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Changed my
sure.
life.
Yeah. I've read a little bit of stuff that you've written and heard, and I will tell you that's one thing. Anyone who's had any sort of physical ailments, physical trauma, physical illness, Getting
Hmm.
back to the body and reassociating your body and your mind together, there's nothing better than martial
Hmm.
arts. And,
Pretty
I'll
powerful
throw,
stuff.
it is, and I'm going to throw yoga into that, but anyone who has suffered domestic violence, physical
Hmm.
abuse, sexual abuse, again, my goal, it's on my many lists of things that I want to do, but martial arts for sure, just to gain that power back of my own body, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I think it's phenomenal what you've done there, by the
Oh,
way.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And any kind of movement
Hmm.
modality that is truly
Hmm.
the mind-body connection is very
Yeah,
powerful. But
I
being
agree.
able to smack somebody and get away with
Oh.
it is really powerful too.
Right.
Taking a stick to someone's head,
I'm
yeah, that's
sure.
fun. Yeah.
I'm sure. Right. Well, just the power, the explosiveness of
Hmm.
knowing you're not
Yes.
going to hurt the other person. We have
Yep.
all that all deep. I was watching what is it, the Woman King with
Yes.
Viola Davis, which
Hmm.
if you haven't seen her interview with Oprah on Netflix, I recommend it
Hmm.
because she's got a powerful story, which is why she's such a great actress. So I started watching that, and unfortunately, as usual, I fell asleep during it. So I want to restart it. But I mean, we started as warriors. I mean, yeah, there are still some tribes out there.
Yeah. And you have
Mhm.
written about that in your blog.
Yes, exactly.
So
Right. Right.
I just want the listeners to know that please do go to Michelle's website, check out
Mhm.
her blog. Some of the writings that she's done are pretty powerful themselves. And I am so excited about your book
Thank
coming out
you.
eventually. And the second
Eventually.
one already planning a second one. That's
Mhm.
just
Oh, yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, I had the calling come to me one day. Like
Hmm.
I had watched the Jeffrey Epstein series on
Hmm.
Netflix. I put it off for a year and I finally watched it. And it was one of my doctors that said that was the experience that I had. And I was like, what are you talking about? And so I watched it and I was like, oh my gosh, really?
Hmm.
That was what I experienced to some extent. And the next morning after watching it, I of course had a panic attack. And the
Well,
8 people I called, nobody was available. Not one person. Well, that's
mhm,
intervention right there. Because what
mhm.
happens, I ended up on my knees back on the floor. But this time it was in front of a window with the sun coming through. And
Oh,
it was pretty intense. Sometimes you still do the whole why, what is this? Like, and I was a science major, like why? And my
mm,
dad, you've been asking why since
right.
you could talk. So the why is I survived to help
Mhm,
so many other people because of all the pain and all the trauma and whatever level. Yeah.
mhm. So,
Mhm.
what final, like, pearl of wisdom or a bit of advice or whatever you want, final thoughts
Yeah.
could you leave with the audience?
I always say trust your instincts. Trust your instincts. That faith and fear can also live together.
Mm,
I've gone to hear lots of people speak. I've read
mhm,
lots of books. I do lots of audibles. I do podcast, all of that, and YouTube. You know, YouTube moments and videos, what have you. That's what's gotten me through all of this, to be honest.
mhm,
But I want to say that there are some things that I've heard and listened to that I don't necessarily agree with, and one of them is you won't be fearful if you're grateful. And I think that you can be fearful and grateful at the same time. You can, because I've lived it.
mhm,
And unless you've lived in a story like mine, you won't understand that because I left and I had faith and fear all in one. Tina Turner's my idol.
mhm,
And I had plans on meeting her through some contacts. And um, the first piece that I wrote on my podcast is only part of something that I wrote after listening to her and doing her chanting and all of that, which is phenomenal for anyone. Um, I believe that she also left with faith and fear in her because anyone that leaves has both within
mhm,
them. And I can also be sad and be grateful. I'm grateful that I'm out.
mhm,
I'm still a bit fearful as to what's to come. I still
mhm,
have faith that, there is something out there that's going to be. I have to, because
mhm,
otherwise I'll still remain in that quicksand that I was left in, that I was
mhm.
put into, and he was the only handout.
Wow.
So, yeah, so it's the proverbial, quicksand. But I have to get myself out. The way I do that the most is, looking up and saying thank you for getting me out because I could have stayed. Like I said, he
Mhm.
would have wanted me to stay. Are you kidding? He would have wanted me to stay. It was everything. But I knew I wouldn't be alive. So that
Mhm.
was the faith that there was something else, that there was hope out there. I was
Mhm.
scared to death.
I'll bet.
Yeah, but I knew. And I was scared to leave my kids. That was the last
Mhm.
thing I wanted. I tried bringing my daughter and she was miserable. So I
Mhm.
knew that she'd be okay. I knew that they would be okay. I knew because he would be just out of the house.
Mhm.
Instead of being at home, he would be out, and out
Mhm.
was better than in.
Mhm.
And my son was, he was an adult at the time, so I knew that legally it was okay. And well, actually, I went to the house every morning because I was about 15 minutes away. But every
Mhm.
morning, my daughter was just starting freshman year of high school. I went in the dark from one home to the other. I made dinner. I mean, I made her school lunch at the other house that I was staying in, the safe house. And I got her up and I got her dressed and I was scared to death. Sometimes he was just coming in while we were leaving for school and reeking of alcohol. Oh, it was horrible. Oh,
What?
yeah. Yeah. So I showed up every morning, picked her up from school, brought her home, got her snack, got her friends, made sure my other son was good. I'd make them dinner and I just wouldn't stay. I put them to bed. I wouldn't stay there at nighttime. I would not sleep there. I wouldn't eat anything from that house. I wouldn't drink anything from that house. I brought groceries there because they had no groceries. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. He was out. He would just come home to sleep, and
Oh
sometimes he
my
didn't.
goodness.
So, I was the mom that didn't just up and leave to save her life. I up and left, but I was 15 minutes away and I came back every day. And that was a really scary time because he would say, I have people following you and da, 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 whatever. And I found trackers in my car, which my attorney has now. Oh yeah, there was that.
Oh God.
It's I know, it's like it's so funny because I'm like, "Oh, I'm done with my story." But wait, there's more. But wait, there's more. And
Yeah,
there's
but
so
wait, there's
wait,
more.
but wait. It's right. And you just don't realize like the level of somebody or a group of people that
Mhm.
can really do like strategies. And again, it's so not in my wheelhouse. I'm like, get up, I was making hard boiled eggs and I would write notes on them. I still do. You are loved, smile, have a great day. I'd make his lunch every morning and put notes in it for all of three of them. That in the end, that's what I was doing. And then I would go, oh yeah, yeah, until it got really scary. I mean, granted, it was still scary, but until it got really, really bad.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Well, I
that's
am
the
so glad
yeah.
you got out of there.
Thank you as well. I am as well. My family is for sure.
I'm sure.
My
And
family is.
I salute you for being so brave, so courageous, for telling your story. I know that reaching out and just sharing your story and talking to people is going to make a difference. I mean, the
I
more
hope
that
so.
people hear how
Hmm.
common this really is,
Hmm.
the less other people have to suffer and be victimized.
Absolutely. I really do believe that is the case. And domestic violence takes on every form and every look. You would walk
Hmm.
by me and you would probably think I'm, spoiled and dressed well and have a lot of money, whatever it is, but nobody would know my story. Or I'd
Hmm.
be in, let's say, my scrubs and I'd be like, okay, great, healthcare worker. And I would take care of you. Or I'd be kind to you in the store. I'd be like, here, let me get that for you. But you would never
Hmm.
know my story. So when I
Hmm.
sat and when I sat in women distress, I was a minority. And the women looked at me like, what is she doing here? And, I said, I'm just like you. We have the same
Hmm.
story. Our stories are all different, but there's a common denominator. And it's very true. And it's a beautiful, humbling experience.
Hmm.
And my goal is to be the face of a different, let's say, ethnicity, a different religion, anything, because it's rampant in our world. COVID made it worse. Inflation's made it worse. You know, everything because it's always been there. You know,
Wow.
so
Well, Michelle, thank you so much for your time and thanks for being on the show.
of course,
This has just been truly amazing, enlightening, eye-opening, and encouraging in the sense that there is a way out.
there's definitely a way out, and I would assume you're putting a link for my website. Reach out
Mhm.
to me on the contact page. I will definitely call or email back.
Mhm.
You don't need to show your face. I don't show my face. We can talk. I can give you resources. I can be that listening ear. I always say, I know what it's like at 1, 2, 3, 5 o'clock in the morning, and you can't sleep, or you're scared, or you don't know what. And I just, the idea that somebody else is feeling that drives me to put myself out there and say, I'm 24/7 here for anybody that needs it. Anybody.
Mhm.
It's my life's goal. It's my mission now.
Mhm. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for that. So for the listeners, I just want to emphasize that please do reach out to Michelle, go to her website, read some of her writings. They're very beautiful
Mhm.
and powerful. And don't hesitate to reach out to her.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
you are in a situation, you need some help.
Mhm.
Don't do this alone.
Yeah. You don't need to do it alone. And we could do it very small. We could
Mhm.
figure out if you want to stay, how to stay. We could figure out if you want to leave, how to do it very subtly. It's, and, and just know that you're not alone and you're loved and seen and heard.
Mm,
Absolutely. You don't have to be
beautiful.
isolated. Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thanks again, Michelle. I really
Thank
appreciate it.
you. Thank
And
you. Thank you for having me and for your strength too. You're
oh,
pretty
thank you.
powerful.
Oh, I
Hmm.
appreciate that.
Of
And
course.
everybody, thank you so much for listening. Wow, huh? What a story. And do reach out to Michelle. And remember, the final thing I just have to say is to trust your instincts,
Hmm.
because our instincts are rarely, if ever, wrong. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.